Good morning, folks, and welcome to this very first episode of Crawl, Walk, Run, Automate webcast. My name is Nick Charlebois. I'm a senior premier field engineer based out of Gagnon, Quebec, and I specialize in everything that has to do with SharePoint automation and DevOps. For the first episode, what I want to do is I want to give you guys an overview of what PowerShell desired state configuration is all about. PowerShell DSC, you might have heard of it, was introduced back in around, let's say, 2014 with PowerShell version 4. It's a way of defining what the desired state of an environment should be and having PowerShell go ahead and configure that environment to be in that desired state, but also to stay in that desired state. So PowerShell DSC is not only about deployment, it's also about monitoring the environment to make sure it stays in that desired state. So what I want to do with you folks is, let's just go to an environment I just created before the session. This environment is a Windows 2019 server box. Nothing that's been installed on it. It's plain vanilla. It's just domain joined. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be writing a new PowerShell desired state configuration. I'm going to be using the reserved keyword configuration. So this is a reserved keyword starting with PowerShell 4. In my case here, when you have Windows Server 2019 installed, the version of PowerShell that you're going to get is version 5.1. I recommend, if you can, to use PowerShell 5.1. It will work with PowerShell 4. However, there are some rough edges that have been fixed with the latest version of PowerShell. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using the configuration keyword. I can give it any name I want. So in my case, I'm going to go and call it configuration Nick. And I'm simply in there going to go and define the various resources I want DSC to go ahead and configure. A resource is really a micro component that DSC will go and configure. So in my case, for the purpose of this demo, I'm just going to be defining a new file resource. I'm going to be calling it directory. This is actually going to be a type directory. So what I want to do is I want to go and create a folder first. And then I'm going to be creating a file inside that folder. So I'm just going to go and do destination path. And that folder will have to exist under C DSC demo, for example. Okay. I'm going to go and create one file. So that will be file 1. Same thing, the destination path is going to be located inside that folder I just created. File1.txt. If I can just type properly. So file1.txt. I'm going to go and put some contents in the file just so that it makes things a little more interesting. So I'm going to go contents equal hello world file1. And I'm just going to go and fix my little typo here. So I have file 1 defined. I'm just going to go and create a second file that I'm going to be calling file 2. I'm going to be putting it under file2.txt and just going to put the updated content in it. Right, so the first thing you need to know about DSC is that DSC is the somewhat human readable way of writing a configuration. However, when you're deploying your configuration, you're going to be dealing with a file extension that is a MUF file. So MUF file stands for Manage Object Format. So what you need to do is you need to compile your DSC configuration into that resulting MUF file. In order to compile the configuration, all you need to do is call into the name of the configuration you defined as if it was a function, right? So what I'm going to be doing is I'm just quickly going to go and create a new directory directly at the root. I'm going to be calling it ctemp. I'm going to go in there. So ctemp. I'm going to be clearing this. So what I need to do here is simply call into that function or that configuration as if it was a function. So my configuration is named Nick. I'm just going to call Nick as if it was a regular PowerShell function. And that's going to go and initiate the compilation of my DSC configuration. So if I run this here, it's going to go in and it should generate a MUF file. There we go. So it generated localhost.muf, right? Meaning that this configuration applies to the current server. Now if I want to go and deploy that configuration, what I need to do is I need to use the start DSC configuration connlet and pass in the name of my configuration, in my case, Nick. By default, start DSC configuration is an asynchronous job. So if I just run this right now, it will execute, but it will create a background job and it won't tell me when it's done. So what I want to do is I want to use the wait switch to tell it basically become a synchronous job and wait until the execution is finished and print all the execution steps. And I want to do verbose just to get more insights as to what's happening. And just in case I already have a configuration that is in memory, I'm going to use the force switch as well, just to make sure that it overrides whatever existing configuration I might have. I'm going to run this. So it executed fine. So now I should see my folder. So see DSC demo, there we go. And it has 2 files in it. I'm just going to show the file extensions. So file 1, file 2 with the content I specified. That's good, but not really exciting, right? The other thing now is if I go in, let me zoom in just a bit. I'm going to go back here. I'm just going to clear my screen. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call into the test DSC configuration connect. This one here simply is going to analyze my environment and figure out, am I in the desired state? So based on the configuration that I have in memory, is this how the server is currently configured or not? So it's a Boolean function. It'll return true or false. So what happens now if I go in and delete file 2 and rerun this? Well, you've all guessed it. It's going to come back as false. The environment is no longer in the desired state. Not really exciting. So what I can do is I can actually use the detailed switch, which is something new with PowerShell 5, and that will go and analyze the current configuration that I specified in memory and return more information as to why the environment is not in that desired state. So if I go and run this, it's going to come back and say, you are not in the desired state. However, the following resources, so directory and file 1, are in their desired state, but file 2 is not. Now, when we talk about DSC, there are 3 configuration modes, as we call them. Right? So basically, DSC by default is set to apply the configuration and do regular checks and just log any configuration drifts. That mode is known as the apply and monitor. DSC revolves around a component called the Local Configuration Manager, or the LCM for short. If you want to get information about how your current machine is configured for DSC, you can use the Get DSC Local Configuration Manager switch, and that's going to print out all the values for your LCM. So in my case, we can see that the configuration mode is set to apply and monitor, and the configuration mode frequency in minute is set to 15. 15 is the minimum you can go down to. 31 day is the maximum. So it's either 15 minutes minimum or once a month maximum. And what that tells the LCM is every 15 minutes, run that test DSC configuration switch pretty much. And if you detect that you're not in the desired state, log an issue or log an event in the event viewer to let the user know that it's not in the desired state. The other configuration modes that we have, well, the first one is apply only. So that basically tells PowerShell DSC, go ahead, configure the environment to be in that desired state, but once you reach that desired state, just your job is done, right? You don't have anything else to do. You're not going to be doing those frequent consistency check. Apply monitor is the default mode. And the other mode that we have is something called apply and auto fix. Okay? So that one means is apply and autocorrect. Sorry, I shouldn't have used autofix. So apply and autocorrect. And that basically tells the LCM, if you detect a configuration drift every 15 minutes, for example, do everything in your power to attempt to fix the server and bring it back in that desired state. That is extremely powerful, but also extremely dangerous. Reason for this, I have a customer of mine that decided to deploy their entire information architecture for SharePoint using DSC. So they deployed hundreds of sites, site collections, and so on. And they set their servers to be applying and autocorrect. About 3 months in the project was a success, by the way, but they decided to do some spring cleaning. They went ahead and deleted about 100 sites that had never been used in the first 3 months. And guess what? Within 15 minutes, all those sites were back, and they couldn't figure out what happened. So apply and autocorrect is powerful, but you need to know exactly what you want to do. I would use it for like services, for example, when you want to make sure that nobody turns off a specific service on a SharePoint environment, for example, or on a Windows Server box, right? So apply and autocorrect is an option. However, the default is apply and monitor. Let's go back to business. So what would happen in the scenario where I would have my LCM set to apply and autocorrect? Well, within 15 minutes, in my case here, it would run the test DSC configuration, detect that this is currently set to false, meaning it's not in the desired state, And what it would do in the background, it would call back into the start DSC configuration switch, but this time it'll use the use existing, basically telling DSC, I detected that I'm no longer in my desired state, so there's been a configuration drift. Just re-execute the start DSC configuration with whatever configuration you have in memory. So I'm going to be running this here. It's going to start my background thread because I didn't use the wait switch, but if I wait a few seconds, I should see my file 2 coming back. One last thing I want to cover with DSC is that every time you send a configuration to the LCM, it's actually going to go and store the MUF file in a specific location, and that is going to be under C Windows, System32, and Configuration. That folder by default is going to be protected, but in there what you see is you see current MUF. That is the current desired state configuration that you've sent to the LCM. So that's the configuration that's in memory. It's on disk. While it was applying it, it would have been named pending.muf. Once the LCM successfully applied the configuration, it renames it to current.muf. One last thing I want to show you before we go is if I was to go and change this here so that file 1 is no longer controlled by the configuration, I would recompile this and then just do another start DSC configuration. Whoops, sorry, I need to actually pass in the name of my configuration, so I'm going to do this here. What's going to happen is that it detected that there's now a new configuration that's been sent. It will take the current MUF and rename it to previous.muf that wasn't there before. And now the new configuration has become current.muf. So I can always roll back to a previous configuration, which is extremely interesting. It's going to do its best to roll back to what the configuration was, right? So it's basically, if you do a rollback, it's going to take that previous.muf and call the start DSC configuration on it. So it will do everything in its power to bring it back to that previous state. So hopefully you folks got a pretty good sense of what DSC is all about, how you can use it in your environments. You can expand on DSC right now. The only thing we've demoed so far was the file resource, but you can go and grab any additional resources from the web, especially from the PowerShell gallery, which is the official repository that we have in Microsoft for all modules. So PowerShellGallery.com, that's a Microsoft-owned site. You can go and expand that, expand the feature set of DSC if you want. So you can download additional building blocks and configure things like SQL Server, IIS, firewalls, right? Anything that has to do with networking, automatically join your machines to domain, configure SharePoint, name it, right? And the other thing I really want you to take out of this session is that DSC is not only there to configure something in the desired state, but it's also there to do monitoring to make sure that it stays in that desired state. So on that note, I wish you guys a good day, and I will see you again next time.